Hello and welcome. You're watching News Central Television. I am Judith TB, and here are the stories making headlines just beyond the continent. And we'll begin with news in the Middle East, where President Donald Trump has issued his strongest warning yet to Hamas, threatening further destruction in Gaza if all remaining hostages are not released. His comments come as the U.S. confirms indirect talks with Hamas over American hostages. Meanwhile, Israel is ramping up military pressures and the humanitarian crisis in Gaza continues to worsen. For News Central, international correspondent Afia Hagen has the latest.
A dramatic ultimatum from President Trump. In a statement on his Truth Social platform, he warned Hamas leaders to flee Gaza while they still have a chance, calling for the immediate release of hostages and the return of bodies. Trump vowed full military backing for Israel, saying he is sending everything it needs to finish the job, as his administration fast-tracks billions of dollars in weapons to the country. The president also issued a stark warning to the people of Gaza, saying a beautiful future awaits, but not if you hold hostages. If you do, you are dead. Trump's comments follow similar threats from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who warned Hamas of consequences beyond imagination if the hostages are not returned. And behind the scenes, the US has now confirmed indirect negotiations with Hamas, an unprecedented move. The US has historically refused any direct engagement with Hamas, which it designates as a terrorist organization. But White House officials confirmed that its hostage envoy, Adam Bowler, has been given the authority to negotiate for the release of American citizens still held in Gaza.
Well, when it comes to the negotiations that you're referring to, first of all, the special envoy who's engaged in those negotiations does have the authority to talk to anyone. Israel was consulted on this matter. And look, dialogue and talking to people around the world to do what's in the best interest of the American people is something that the president has proven is what he believes is good faith effort to do what's right for the American people.
Meanwhile, conditions in Gaza are deteriorating, with virtually the entire population displaced by months of Israeli airstrikes. Aid deliveries have now been blocked. France, Britain and Germany have condemned the humanitarian situation as catastrophic, while South Africa has accused Israel of using starvation as a weapon of war. Gazan civilians say they are struggling to survive, with drinking water running out and waste piling up. And as diplomatic efforts intensify, a new Arab-backed reconstruction plan for Gaza is being floated. But Trump's proposal, which suggests taking over the territory and displacing its people, is facing global backlash. The Arab League is instead calling for Gaza's rebuilding through an international trust fund, but analysts remain skeptical that Israel will abandon Trump's vision in favor of an Arab-led initiative. For News Central, I'm Afia Hagen.
In the meantime, reactions have trailed Donald Trump's warning that unless Israeli hostages are released, the people of Gaza would be, quote, dead and face, quote, hell. His statement has sparked outrage among Gazians, with residents in Khan Yunis saying their land has already become a living hell. Hamas has accused Trump of encouraging Israel to ignore the fragile ceasefire. Now, following his earlier proposal to relocate Palestinians from Gaza, France has backed an alternative Arab plan to rebuild Gaza while keeping Palestinians on their land, but insists Hamas must be excluded from governance. Meanwhile, Trump's administration has confirmed direct talks with Hamas over American hostages, with Israel being consulted. Trump has vowed to expedite military aid to Israel, warning Hamas leaders to leave Gaza. The ongoing conflict has killed over 48,000 Palestinians and 1,218 Israelis.
حركة حماس لا تستسلم بسهولة. شاهدنا على مدار عام ونصف كمية القصف، الصواريخ، أطنان المتفجرات التي سقطت على غزة. كان من ضمن أهداف رئيس الوزراء الإسرائيلي نتنياهو هو تفكيك قدرات حماس العسكرية، لكن حماس ليست بتلك السهولة بالاستسلام.
وإذا انصاعت حماس لقرار ترامب نبقى احنا فشلنا.
هذا من علامات الساعة.
نبقى احنا فشلنا. مش لازم تنصاع. مش لازم نخاف منهم.
بالنسبة لتسليم الأسرى نرفض لأنه إذا بدهم يسلموا الأسرى عن طريق صفقة يبيضوا السجون ويعطونا حقوقنا اللي راحت علينا وبيوتنا اللي تهدمت ودم شهدائنا وأولادنا وجرحانا، كيف نسلمهم من غير ولا أي حاجة؟
ما ضلش شيء نبكي عليه. تدمرنا، بيوتنا تدمرت، فقدنا أبنائنا، أبهاتنا، شيوخنا، ما ضل حاجة نبكي عليها. إيش ضل؟ يعني ترامب بيقول بدي أعمل غزة جهنم، ما هي صارت وخلصت جهنم، هو في أكثر من هيك؟ ما في أكثر من هيك.
And now to make sense of this, we're joined by U.S. national security and statecraft expert, God bless Utubore. God bless, thanks so much for joining us. And let's just get started, shall we? How do you think Trump's warning to Hamas might impact the ongoing negotiations for the release of American hostages?
Well, I mean, when you look at the way Trump engages, I think it would technically achieve a certain kind of objective, which is to hasten the process and ensure that Hamas understands that when Trump says something, he means it. You look at what has happened with the extradition and capture of the guy who masterminded the death of 13 American servicemen and the pullout of Afghanistan should definitely remind Hamas that when the president of the United States, especially Trump in particular, says something, he means it. How it impacts it, I think, is just going to make things faster and make Hamas actually do what is in the best interest of not just them, but the people of Gaza, because I don't think Trump is playing.
And what are the possible geopolitical consequences of increased U.S. involvement in the Israel-Gaza conflict?
Well, I mean, when you look at the geopolitical implication, it just further cements our age-long American policy of always standing with Israel and making sure that Israel has what it needs to be able to defend itself, which is part of that policy. The implication is simple, that the previous United States administration was not as direct and confrontational as this one is. And what it means is that for everyone who's backing Hamas, what Trump is technically doing is telling everybody, look, we're not playing by the old rules, and if we have American hostages anywhere in the world, it's a dent on any American administration. So what Trump is simply saying, and by extension what the United States is saying, is look, Hamas and everybody who can still listen, if you have American hostages, and we've been trying to get everybody out and we're doing some negotiations, we're not going to tolerate the continued detention of American citizens. So the implication is everybody in the Middle East and everyone who cares to listen, just know that we're not going to allow that to continue.
Right. How is Israel balancing military action with diplomatic efforts to sort of secure hostage releases while addressing international concerns over the humanitarian crisis?
Well, I mean, look, if you want peace, we're taught to prepare for war, and you don't show strength through weakness. You show strength through strength. You and when you do humanitarian, of course, it's the principle of conflict. Even if you're fighting, it doesn't take away your humanity. But of course, what has just happened is that if you have a stakeholder in the entire process that is acting not in the interest of the United States, there would be, of course, maybe the carrot and stick approach, where you have the United States is very big on humanitarian, support to people in Gaza. But if Hamas, which is the fighting force, is not going to release American citizens, of course, there definitely will be military, implication to that. So I'm very well okay with the concurrent execution of both strategies, where we're supporting humanitarian, initiatives, but also making sure that the American citizens are freed and that American national interest is protected.
And what role do indirect talks between the U.S. and Hamas play in shaping the broader dynamics of this conflict?
Well, I think it quickens it, but of course the U.S. has a very important age-long strategy. We don't negotiate with terrorists. That's what the United States says. And now you see that it's not a direct talks with Hamas. It's an indirect talks through the Israelis, and we're trying to see how that plays out. But my position and my analysis is that it quickens the process, and Hamas will definitely understand that, look, if you do not do what is right, you have a new sheriff in town, and I don't think it would be good for Hamas, and by extension, sadly, you have innocent Gazans who are going to be caught in that crossfire.
Caught in that crossfire, indeed. How might, Trump's statements, would it influence the positions of other global powers such as the EU, Russia, and China on the Gaza war? Would it influence them to come behind Gaza or be beside Israel? Your take, finally, because we're out of time.
Well, look, the Israeli-Gaza crisis has divided the world in ways that we've never seen in a long time. I cannot tell you right now that geopolitically, geostrategically, there are a lot of moving parts to this. The opinion and support has changed dramatically. We've seen people who once supported Hamas, they've left, now supporting Israel, supporting the United States. But behind the scenes, there's a lot of geopolitical interest, moving parts that I believe, at the end of the day, what Trump wants to see is a complete cessation of hostilities and the release of American citizens and hostages, as well as Israeli hostages. And of course, there's a conflict, there's an agreement that at the end of this, Hamas will no longer be the leading party in Gaza. So I do not know what Russia, China, and the rest of the world and the EU will do, but everybody's looking at what Trump is doing carefully and just following daily what the position is. But I can tell you that it will not be a good ending for Hamas coming out of this crisis, because at the end of the day, what it means is that they cannot manage the situation in Gaza. And of course, Israel would never, ever agree that Hamas continues to run the Gaza Strip. So let's see what comes out of this. But when I have more information, of course, maybe there'll be other times where I can come back and tell you what I see, what the moving parts are when I have more information.
Well, God bless you. You've done so far. You've done well so far. I want to say thank you. God bless Otubore, just giving us a bit of insight on the Gaza-Israel stanza with U.S. now being in the mix there. Once again, thank you. We'll switch gears now to North America, where Ukraine's ambassador to the UK has said that the U.S. is destroying the established world order, criticizing the new Trump administration's way of handling foreign policy. Now, the spokesperson said the White House had, quote, questioned the unity of the whole Western world, end quote. His comments come amid an apparent cooling of tensions between Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy and President Trump after a public falling out between the two in the Oval Office on Friday. Kyiv has made attempts to mend relations with Washington in recent days after the U.S. paused its military aid to Ukraine and intelligence sharing in a bid to bring Zelenskyy to the negotiating table. Meanwhile, the U.S. Supreme Court has rejected President Donald Trump's attempt to freeze around $2 billion in foreign aid payments, ruling 5-4 in favor of resuming payments on completed contracts. The court upheld a lower court's decision requiring the government to fulfill its obligation with the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, and the State Department. Chief Justice John Roberts and Justice Amy Coney Barrett, both conservatives, joined the three liberal justices in the majority. The ruling comes amid Trump's campaign to reduce government spending, particularly targeting USAID. In opposition, Justice Samuel Alito criticized the decision, questioning the power of a single district judge to compel the government to make such payments. U.S. President Donald Trump's administration is planning to revoke temporary legal status for some 240,000 Ukrainians who fled the conflict with Russia. The move, expected as soon as April, would be a stunning reversal of the welcome Ukrainians received under President Joe Biden's administration. The planned rollback of protections for Ukrainians was underway before Trump publicly feuded with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy last week. It was part of a broader Trump administration effort to strip legal status from more than 1.8 million migrants allowed to enter the U.S. under temporary humanitarian parole programs launched under the Biden administration. And now to South America, where Argentine police have clashed with demonstrators in Buenos Aires during the weekly retirees protest, which saw a surge in participation, this time from football supporters. The protest was fueled by a social media campaign urging people to, quote, not leave the pensioners alone, end quote. Retirees voiced their frustration, saying, quote, first they target retirees, second they are destroying the country. Another protester have also expressed concern for the vulnerable, and they have also stated that they all want to be better off but should not do that at the expense of the most vulnerable.
Están haciendo mierda al país, primero que se agarran con los jubilados, segundo que están devastando el país, se lo ve clarísimo, ¿viste? La educación, la salud, esto no se arregla. Y la única manera de manifestarse es salir a la calle, la única que tenemos.
Acá hay una realidad, la realidad es que se está haciendo el ajuste sobre el pueblo, esa es la realidad. Entonces todos queremos estar mejor, pero no a costa de los más débiles. Te vuelvo a repetir, tengo un hermano discapacitado.
And the news continues in Europe, where the European Union leaders have gathered in Brussels for an emergency summit to discuss Ukraine and European defense as concerns over U.S. support have intensified. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has thanked the EU for its backing following Washington's decision to cut military aid and intelligence sharing. Standing alongside EU leaders Ursula von der Leyen and Antonio Costa, Zelenskyy has expressed gratitude for Europe's continued support. Von der Leyen has called the situation a watershed moment, unveiling a plan to mobilize 800 billion euros to strengthen Europe's defense. French President Emmanuel Macron has urged increased military spending, while Germany's Chancellor-in-waiting Friedrich Merz has pledged a strategic shift in defense policy. The EU's 27 nations are expected to approve defense plans to bolster security and support Ukraine against Russia's ongoing invasion.
We shouldn't underestimate our own power when it comes to Europe, the economic power we have and the strength that we have here. So we should definitely use this strength that we have.
For me, the most important thing now is to be very frank, to rearm Europe, and I don't think we have a lot of time. So rearming Europe, spent on defense and deterrence, that's the most important message, and at the same time, of course, continue.
On the sidelines of the summit, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has warned against any detected peace in Ukraine, emphasizing the need for a just and fair resolution that upholds Ukraine's sovereignty and independence. Speaking at the Brussels summit, Scholz has stressed that Ukraine must not be forced into unfavorable settlement amid concerns over Washington's diplomatic engagements with Moscow. His remarks have come as fears grow that negotiations could pressure Kyiv into accepting terms that compromise its territorial integrity. Scholz has reiterated Germany's support for Ukraine, calling for continued international efforts to ensure a peace agreement that aligns with Ukraine's interests. The statement has underscored ongoing tensions surrounding the conflict and global diplomatic efforts to find a resolution that does not undermine Ukraine's autonomy.
Es ist ganz wichtig, dass wir sicherstellen, dass die Ukraine nicht einen Diktatfrieden akzeptieren muss, sondern dass es um einen fairen, gerechten Frieden, der die Souveränität und Unabhängigkeit der Ukraine sicherstellt, geht. Deshalb also die konkreten Vorschläge zu dazu, dass die Waffen in der Luft und auf See erstmal schweigen sollen, dass die Energieinfrastruktur nicht weiter gefährdet wird und dass die Ausgangsbasis sein kann für Gefangenenaustausch, für die Rückführung von entführten Personen.
European leaders on Thursday said they would stand by Ukraine and spend more on defense, in a world upended by Donald Trump's reversal of U.S. policies. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk, upon his arrival at the summit in Brussels, said that Europe must take up the challenge and win it. Tusk added that Europe as a whole is truly capable of winning any military, financial, economic confrontation with Russia. Many EU leaders hailed the European Commission's proposals this week to give them fiscal flexibility on defense spending and to jointly borrow up to 150 billion euros to lend to EU governments to spend on their militaries. Chairman of the meeting, Antonio Costa, also reiterated that they are all gathered to defend Ukraine. Still in Europe, Russian Foreign Minister Serhii Lysak has stated that no one forbids French President Emmanuel Macron from calling Russian President Vladimir Putin. Speaking at a press conference in Moscow alongside Zimbabwe's Foreign Minister, Lavrov responded to Macron's recent address in which he labeled Russia, quote, a threat to France and Europe, end quote. He also dismissed the remarks, labeling it as, quote, absurd and nonsense, end quote. He noted that Macron frequently asserts his intention to call Putin, emphasizing that there are no restrictions preventing such communications. Macron's statements come amid ongoing tensions between Russia and Western nations over the war in Ukraine. While diplomatic channels remain open, Lavrov's remarks highlight Russia's rejection of Macron's characterization of its role in global affairs.
Знаете, господин Макрон, периодически заявляет так горделиво, что он позвонит Путину обязательно, поговорит с ним. У него такие возможности есть. Никто, как говорится, не запрещает. Наоборот, президент постоянно подчеркивает свою открытость.
And that's all we can take from beyond the continent. But if you are on the continent, so precisely in Nigeria, you can send us your eyewitness report to the WhatsApp number now showing on the screen. And while you're at it, make sure to follow us on social media. We're at News Central Television, that's at News Central TV on all social media platforms. You can watch News Central live on DSTV channel 422. We're on GoTV channel 23, Star Times channel 274, Avo TV, and YouTube. Many thanks for watching. I am Judith TV. Good night.